We move on now to our first sustainability panel session, which looks at the global trends in ESG communications. Please welcome our panelist and moderator, Liu Xiaowei, Director Special Projects Asia World Energy Council, Jason Plamandan, Regional Sustainability Manager, Equinix, Ong So Chin, President Aware Singapore, and our moderator, Lars Fudish, Principal Consultant and Managing Director, Precious Communications.
Thank you and good morning. Let's talk about a very passionate topic: green social governance, gender equality. I'm sure all of us have something on our minds when we talk about that. My name is Lars Fudish. I'm really happy, excited, passionate, and honored to be on this panel. And because it's such a big topic, there will be two panels. So in the first one, we'll talk about what does it mean to be a leader in this space. And then the second panel will break it down and what does it mean for us as communicators, because we had a quick pre-discussion and we said we're at the point where organizations can't just talk about it anymore. We have to move from storytelling to story doing. But let's start with the telling and the self-introductions. Let's start on my very left. Xiaowei, please. And why you're passionate about ESG.
Thank you, Lars. Good morning, everyone. We had a good beginning of the summit, talking about some really big issues. My name is Xiaowei Liu, just call me Xiaowei. I'm now working for the World Energy Council as Director for Asia Special Projects. And previously, I worked in a large international energy company called Shell. Before that, I started in China, working for the government, Ministry of Chemical Industry. So, yeah, I won't tell you how old I am. My passion for ESG started many years ago when we started building a greenfield petrochemical industry, where I learned social baseline studies, livelihood restoration, real practice about bring SD into practice. And thereafter, I have been on this journey for ESG for the last over 2 decades. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Jason.
Thanks, Lars. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Plamandan. I'm the Regional Manager for sustainability for a company called Equinix. They're a data center company that operates globally. We have about 240 data centers worldwide, including 51 here in Asia Pacific across 7 countries. So I manage strategy, leadership, executing our strategy locally, and making sure that we're engaging and communicating with folks internally and externally, including training our folks around ESG and why it's important, but also on the ground, ensuring that sustainability and ESG is integrated into the projects that we're building all around the world. So that's what I do. What I'm passionate about, Lars, that was your question, is I guess making sure that society, that the people that we engage with are involved meaningfully and they feel like they're participating in decision making. That's where my passion lies.
Thank you. Over to Sochin.
Hi guys, my name is Sochin. I'm Ong Sochin. I've had a career in journalism and communications. I started with the Straits Times, went on to corporate roles in Shell, in Netflix, and I did a stint in IPS as well. Hi Arun. So last year I decided to step off the corporate ladder, and because I wanted to spend more time doing what I felt were more meaningful and impactful things at this stage in my life. And one of them is taking on the president position of the board of Aware. I'm not sure how many of you know, I think Aware is the foremost women's rights and gender equality organization in Singapore. It was founded in 1985. That's 37 years ago. I think some of you weren't even born yet. But we've been fighting the fight since then. There's been a lot of progress, but I think there's a lot more that can be done, and that's my passion, gender equality.
Thank you. We'll just share. Okay. We'll just share this one. That's actually already reducing energy, but that's on a different topic. So the the overall kind of topic is what makes a leader here. And one thing that we just discussed previously was it's not, ESG seems to be all focused on the E, and sometimes the S and the G get a little bit hidden. And Jason said, oh no, I'm not just looking after environmental impact, we also have social issues and so on and so forth. So Jason, maybe you want to kick it off there. What does it mean to be a leader in the ESG space?
So for me, being a leader, there's two aspects, right? There's individual leadership and there's organizational leadership. As an individual, I think it comes from really strong beliefs and a passion around sustainability. And that for me comes from experience and bruises and scars. And I can share with you some of the scars that I've had working in the field when I was engaging with stakeholders that were directly impacted by development, and sitting across the table from people who felt really impacted by a pipeline that was going through their property. And so much so that they had pulled their baler across the road to block our activities so we could no longer access the project site. And then I was there to talk them down, so to speak, talk about how we could work through their issues to remove the roadblocks so that the activity could continue. So being at the pointy end of the stick and feeling that, that hurt and that pain of those stakeholders gives you a lot of bruises and scars that you can take with you into the boardroom when you're having conversations about why ESG is important, why it's important that we have these policies and these targets and goals in place. It's because of these interactions we're having with the external world and the need to make sure that we're having less of an impact. So,
thank you. Serge, we talked about it's time to move to act and not just talk about anymore. What does a leader do to get the momentum going beyond 20 years of discussions and talking?
Yes, indeed. At the moment, I think it's a right moment. The COP27 is ongoing as we speak. And I'm sure everyone now read headlines from the last few days, yeah? And the UN Secretary General already said that if we don't take the action, we are on the accelerator to bring the world to hell. So Paris Agreement was reached 2015. And between then and then we're looking ahead, their countries started to set goals for carbon peaking by 2030 or carbon neutrality by 2050 or 60 or 70. You are in this part of the world, we have all of them, yeah? Singapore, of course, is 2050, China is 2060, India made a pledge for 2070. I just take a simple view to say 2015, when the Paris Agreement was made, people talking about 2030 thinking, oh, still 15 years ago or away. Now we are in 2022, and it's just in the middle point between 15 and 30. Time is not in our favor. So there's a lot of talk, the pledge, the targets. Actually, it is more about taking actions at all levels. And I believe everyone is a leader, starting from all of us as individual consumer, because we do have carbon footprint. Yeah, how do we consume responsibly? Of course, society, leaders, industry, all have to chip in. Leadership at all levels. Taking actions.
Yeah, just following up on what Xiaowei and Jason just said. I think leadership, I agree. I think it's about the social issue as well. It's all the ESG is all intertwined because there's an impact. There's the S level that's impacted by the E and the G. And I think that's where, I think that's a good place to start. And that's a good place to start with doing something, like what Xiaowei said, right? Because of the E and the S and the G, I think the easiest thing to do is actually the S, which you could actually start tomorrow. So you start recycling, you start speaking up for gender equality in your workplace, asking your HR for better practices, more fairer practices. That's the S part, which you can start. The E part, requires machinery to move, might take some time. So it's all intertwined, really. And I think for leadership to be really effective, there's the authenticity and the lived experience that needs to be there. So if you see people suffering, or you yourself have been impacted, if you've suffered from gender violence or whatever, or some environmental inequality, then you'll be spurred on and inspired to do something and to speak up.
So quick follow-up, because by nature of the order of the letters, ESG often goes majority into the environment kind of corner. Now we have COP27, Sharm el-Sheikh, whatever. Do you feel like attention and resources are, because of that, fading away from the social issues that you're promoting?
I think you can't really ignore the social issues because they're kind of linked. So I think globally, women are more severely impacted by climate change than men, because in poorer countries, in rural communities, women are the ones who have to go out and look for household energy resource, look for food and water, and drought and burning forests kind of have an impact on them, adverse impact on them. So with that, and with the world on fire, I think it's kind of hard to ignore at some point.
Yeah, I wanted to build on that point about E and S interlinked. They are not separate, yeah? And of course, we all know this ESG journey or sustainability journey started in the 80s and 90s. People started to scrutinize the quote-unquote bad players in the industry, starting from chemical, and then, of course, evolved into the social aspect, and now the governance side of things, which is very much from a corporate perspective, because if you're listed, you have to do this reporting, you have to be transparent, you have to deliver your promises. Let me just back to that interlinkage between social and environment. We all have now witnessed or experienced extreme weathers, flooding, all that, extreme heat, particularly like the disasters, natural disasters, could easily result in displacement of people. And that could also be over borders. Yeah? It could be displacement of people that resulted in migrants, the war, for instance. And then something started as a natural environmental disaster could end up with a social challenge and social risk. It's not just in one country, it could be cross-border. So in that respect, you could already start to thinking when that happened, it's not just like, okay, getting the flood control, but also how do you deal with the after impact where people are being impacted.
So one thing is effort, right? And everybody agrees we have to do something. How then do we show the impact beyond how much doing good is good enough? And maybe to Jason in that case, you have reporting that you have to fulfill, but how do you transparently, honestly have that discussion internally to say, hey, let's forget the minimum requirements. That is what we as an organization really want to hold ourselves accountable for. How do you move that conversation from it's a tick on a report card versus it's something ingrained in the company's DNA?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, human nature is that we don't act until something hurts, right? And so with Shell as an example, Brent Spar really kicked off a huge effort internally around sustainability, engagement, ensuring that we were working with our stakeholders more effectively, more meaningfully to achieve what we wanted to achieve, recognizing that there was a major impact on our business if we didn't do that. And the organizations that lead in this space really recognize that sustainability is a business must. There's a business case around sustainability, and the only way you'll succeed is by being sustainable. You talked earlier about, the geopolitics and what impact that's having on ESG. And unfortunately, for those companies who haven't had those major pains like Shell had back in the 80s, they're stepping back from their ESG targets and goals because they feel like, profit is still number one. Planet and people come kind of secondary. But until you've had those experiences that really make you recognize that, no, actually, planet and people come first. Profit, just as important, but we won't have profit if we don't have planet and people. So
Everybody will agree on that,
Yeah.
but how do you make that happen? Sorry, I have to drill there.
Yeah,
Or
that's okay.
the others, please chime in, because
How do you make it
it's a
happen?
tricky turning point, right?
I would say, you deliver what you measure. So in a way, setting targets, having matrix is important. And of course, it is about leadership commitment at the very top, having a principle-based approach, having that commitment, but setting in target. And many companies now are right? They have commitment and they link, executive payment to that. That's one part of matrix. But the shareholders or stakeholders are looking more than just beyond the matrix, what you measure. It's about your action. It is about what you have delivered and how do you show that. Even from investment perspective, even if you say, I'm in a transition to a green energy, but the people will say, okay, how much and what is the proportion you have put in terms of investment vis-a-vis your commitment. So the transparency kick in, yeah? So when you had the commitment, and you have to show that and back up with action and data, and transparency is there to play a role.
I think targets are important. I mean, it's something to work towards. And it's something for, I guess it's like a benchmark for people to hold you accountable to. How you get there, I think that's your question. That has to be the internal discussion, the push and pull. But I think that's where the storytelling also comes in. And that's what we do as PR professionals, right? Tell stories. And it's a famous saying, when 100,000 people die, it's like a statistic. But one really compelling story of a person that's impacted, that really changes hearts and minds sometimes and can move the needle on things. And I think that's where we can come in as PR professionals as well.
It's the picture of the turtle with the straw, right? That changed the world.
It did. Oh my goodness, that video was. I still remember it.
Yeah, I guess that point, just to further a little bit, is to put people at the center of the action and put people in the center of that story, humanizing the storytelling. That would be my sort of point.
Just a heads up, like every panel, we'll also encourage you to share your questions and channel challenge the panelist, channel your energy towards the panel. So please get ready. There are the two microphones. I have a list that will last us until tomorrow, but it's not what I want to know, it's what you want to know or discuss. So please get ready to the microphones if you have any questions. One thing that's obviously on the mind of many of us at least is there's a global recession looming or already happening. Meta just announced to lay off 11,000 people yesterday. We have especially European manufacturers that are cutting back globally. Spending, we're over the peak of discretional spending. So question number one, is ESG investment discretional spending or is it strategic investment? Second, how do you think, how tough will it get with your fundraiser next week?
Yeah, that's right. So Aware is having a big fundraising ball on Saturday. So if you guys are interested, just go to our website and support us. But you're right. I think it's a very pressing question that other organizations are also facing, organizations that depend on donations to survive, like Aware. And it will be tough. I think we're facing up to the fact that it's going to be tough because a lot of companies are probably going to cut their donations or stop donating altogether, and not just organizations, but individuals as well who've been supportive of the cause. So again, I don't know, it's a bridge we have to cross. We've gone through tough times before, and I think if people really believe in the cause, they will find a way to support. The support may be a little smaller, but as long as they keep supporting us, that's the best we can hope for.
How do you show in a purpose-driven approach success in how you move the needle? If you're an energy consumer, you can say, okay, energy consumption went down by X%. Relatively clear to show. How do you measure and portray success in your effort towards a more gender equal society?
I think if you're talking in terms of PR, it's the number of media mentions we get, the number of invitations we get to appear on panels like this, invitations to speak at workshops. So I think Aware has done very, very well. And that's part of the outreach and education part. I think we're quite successful there. Another measure of success, probably more important for us, is I think we are top of mind for a lot of women when it comes to searching for help. We run a sexual assault helpline. We have a women's helpline, a sexual assault care center, and a women's helpline. And if you remember, recently there was a case in the newspapers about some schoolboys who were sexually assaulted by their CCA teacher. One of the boys actually reached out to Aware for help. But unfortunately, when the caseworker followed up, he refused to speak because he was too afraid. But it goes to show that we have become top of mind, not just for women who need help, but for vulnerable communities in general. And I think that's a tremendous measure of our success.
I'm following up on your question about whether sustainability is strategic or not, right? In my mind, it comes right in the definition of sustainability, right? Sustainable companies will endure. It's just a matter of definition. And if we're doing things in a sustainable way, then we're going to be around for 100 years when companies that aren't are no longer around. And when it comes to the social side of things, diversity, inclusiveness, and belonging are what retain and attract the best talent. And that's a key part of your sustainability as an organization. So absolutely strategic in my mind.
One follow-up question then on that. Thanks for chiming in there, Jason. There is so many things we can do in the ESG space. And I often feel it doesn't matter what you do. There's always somebody standing up and saying it's not enough. It's never enough. How do you kind of work with your leadership to also say, hey guys, calm down, we're on the right track? Because you're kind of, who's the voice of reason in your organization on that? Because it seems like enough is never enough on these kind of causes.
I actually think that statement is right. Enough is not enough. And that is about leadership, not just doing the bare minimum to be compliant. You have to stretch, yeah? So their framework thinking, you know, doing something right, which is in compliance with law, regulation, doing something better for the bigger society and future, right? That is go beyond the bare minimum. So it's a journey for ESG and sustainability. And the mankind, over the millions and thousands of years, were progressing. You mentioned about recession is looming. Yes, but it's just a short-term challenge. Not saying it's not challenging. It's very challenging. So real leadership actually is about balancing that short-term with the long-term, balancing the, you know, the supply side of things, balancing the short-term crisis of living costs, but at the same time, still having the eyes and balls on the longer-term challenges like climate. Urgency is there, right? So for me, that is a balancing act, and that is the leadership, and it's doing more than the bare minimum of compliance.
I totally agree with Xiaowei, and also picking up on Jason's point. Enough is never enough. I agree. We need to always keep, pushing the envelope a little bit. And Jason, you mentioned diversity, and I think that's a key part of leadership. Not to have one type of voice. You need diverse people on boards. You need men and women, different kinds of people from different walks of life with different perspectives. And from that comes some kind of true organizational leadership, where you take in different perspectives and not just one narrow vision, which may be the wrong vision ultimately. So I think diversity, you're absolutely right, it's very important.
You asked the question, when is enough enough? I think enough is enough when all of these stakeholders who are either impacted or interested in the development have been meaningfully engaged and are part of a decision. And I think enough is enough when you take all the puts and takes of development and there's no harm to people or planet.
That sounds like a little bit too rosy for me. Shouldn't we look at it from the other point of view, like in negotiations, if everybody is unhappy with the outcome, you have the perfect result. Isn't that a little bit like how it should be? You know, the CFO is unhappy.
It's Disney. But also it's Disney, and then all the birds are chirping.
Yeah. Let's just not talk about the tweets, okay, today. Do we have questions from the audience? ESG leadership, I'm sure if you have answers, please enlighten us. If you have questions, please challenge us. What makes leaders, thank you, in the ESG space?
Hi, can you hear me? Yep. Yes. Hi, I'm Jessica. And I just wanted to share that I work for an American company. So they recently hired an inclusion and diversity director. So how important is this role in ESG, and what is the progress like in Asia Pacific? Thank you.
Jason, you have that kind of role, so maybe you start.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important. Equinix is also US based, but obviously operations in Asia Pacific, and diversity, inclusiveness, and belonging is a huge piece of our strategy to ensure that our people feel they're safe, they belong, and they matter. Is it important for the organization? Absolutely. We have set up, what are they called, employee networks to ensure that all the diverse people that are within our company feel that they belong, that they have a group that they can turn to when they have issues, or that they can share kind of outlooks and views with. There's 9 of them across the organization covering all sorts of different diverse views and things like that. And it's a key part of our outreach externally as well. So we have something called We Are Equinix, and it brings together all those folks with the different and diverse views internally in the organization, and then they work together externally on our social platform to deliver, funding and different organizational stuff to the communities where we operate. Sorry, go ahead.
Quick question. Like in organizations I worked like 10, 15, 20 years ago, sustainability was kind of a dotted line, or rather a bullet point under the communications department. Where ideally in an organization should that role sit and report to?
Well, this is a good one for people that used to work at Shell, because that was a big thing, yeah.
Yeah, I guess, the question about having a D&I officer, or like a decade ago, companies started to have chief sustainability officer, and particularly the last couple of years, these roles are pumping up everywhere. I would say yes, that's at least to show the organizations or companies are starting to pay attention to this. Whether the driver has been by regulation, by compliance, but at least the company started to pay attention to how to address this issue. The real challenge, I think this is like an iceberg. You show what's above the water. Yeah, you have this commitment, you have this organization set up. The real challenge is what is you are doing as an organization, a company, that to actually bring the unseen challenges to surface them. Yeah, so it's no longer just an iceberg, you see what's there showing, but more what you're doing. So I think the real test is, what are you going to do about how you measure the progress in your D&I, at board level, at management level, at workforce level, for instance. Just one thing to talk about, how you measure what you committed to, and put your money where your mouth is. Yeah, people make commitments about transition into greener energy, but still investment, majority of that in traditional. Then I think there is a mismatch, and the storytelling and the story doing gap.
I think I just want to answer Jessica's question as well. I think it's congratulations that your company has a D&I department. And I think because Aware has a corporate consulting arm called Catalyze, and I would say we've had a lot more engagements the last few years. It's picked up. A lot of companies have called us in to give workshops, give training, and sometimes do some crisis management as well. So while it may have started as a tick on the box, I think that's where your quotas and targets come in, right? Okay, it's like a perfunctory thing, fine, but let's run with it. Let's do something with it and effect some change. You have that real estate, do something with it. I'm glad companies are doing it, even if it's just a tick on the box for them. Better that than nothing at all.
And those social metrics, those social metrics are actually tied to executive compensation, because they truly believe that this will drive a better organization in the end, right?
Well, apart from that, I think companies who actually stand out are the companies who take a stand on social and environmental issues. Yeah, they are not shy away from it. They have a stand, and it starts maybe from a commitment, but then followed by actions. Yeah, so that's make the company
Okay,
stand out.
I'll put you all on the spot, and I just want a very short, maximum one-sentence answer, and you can't say CEO. So where in an organization should that head director of ESG, whatever it means, that's a big kind of thing, you can't break it up. Where should that person sit? Who should it report to?
I don't think there's any one place that it should sit, as long as they have a seat at the table, right? So I've been in a couple of organizations where it's been done differently, but most importantly, it's that that person has a key role, a key seat at the table, at the top, at the executive level, right? So that those views and what they're trying to achieve is trickled down from the top. It's grassroots, but it's also important that you have that positioning and that structure at the board level.
That sounds
That
like
doesn't
floating
answer-
around, but in an org chart, where would you put that role if you had to pick one?
You're just
Yeah, no, sorry, you can't
I
get
would
a
say
COO.
directly reporting to CEO.
If that's not possible, who's the next in line? COO, CFO, HR?
No,
Comms.
CEO.
Okay.
In our organization, it's the CFO.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
I'm going to be out of left field with my answer. I'd say everybody should be director of ESG in their company, and that's the S part. You play the part. You put your money where your mouth is. You walk up to whoever your boss is, whether it's the CEO or the HR manager or whoever, and you speak up. And there you'll be director of ESG.
I agree with the statement that everyone should be the leader on ESG, whether there is a specific role in the organization, because if you make ESG part of the way you do business, that means every business leader is an ESG leader.
And be well read, right? Read up and don't just, bury your nose in your books or your phone, doom scrolling all the time. Find out what's going on in the world. And I think that's ESG is happening all around you, effectively.
Okay. Do we have any final questions from the audience? Yes, please. If you can, introduce yourself and then your question.
Hi, I'm Mariam. I wanted to ask about what should the PR person's role be when it comes to crisis in ESG? I think we talked a lot about the positivity, the optimism, but there's a lot of bad news in ESG. I think even from COP27, scientists were asking Hill and Knowlton, drop all your fossil fuel clients. Ailman has also stepped away from wanting to support all the bad players in the market, but these are the people who probably need PR help the most, but PR agencies are also protecting our own brand reputation. We don't want to help them solve problems, even though we are the best suited to help them out. So what do we do? Do we help them or do we shy away?
Thanks for the question. I'm glad that I'm the moderator and don't have to answer that one.
Well, number one, earlier we talked about doing and versus saying. Yeah, so it's really talking about helping clients who may already have a bit of reputation or brand crisis in the area of ESG. I think it's good. It's a good thing that people started to be aware these things are being challenged. And my advice is, yes, you should help them, because transition is not overnight. Yeah, and I think a lot of the stories need to have context and to bring that understanding to the audience. It's about communication, continuous engagement, but using fact and data backed up evidence, using actions, using deliveries. Yeah, how do you tell that story matters a lot. And because we can't, matter of fact is that we can't switch from fossil fuel today to tomorrow to be 100% renewable energy. That is not the case, and that will result in, as you can see in Europe, energy crisis. So that will affect every one of us. So therefore, there is a stretching and challenging way of engaging in that very complex issue for your client. And it's a prime opportunity for PR company or PR professionals to stepping up.
I think one of the things that I just wanted to bring to this is the thought of something that I learned from an organization I worked with before. And the way they managed communication was to ensure that the organization first performed well, and had their behaviors in check, and then they communicated. So it wasn't PR spin. It wasn't, something goes wrong and now they're trying to make it better. It was ensure that the organization is operating in a way that they're performing and they're behaving in a certain manner, and then communication comes, and it's a much easier job after that. Yeah.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And I think, there is this headline about greenwashing, yeah? But that's the say-do gap, meaning that you make a commitment and make a pledge, but you're short of delivery. On the other side, we also see some companies are green hushing. It's the opposite. They've done a lot, but they haven't said enough, which we also need that example, because companies who have done well in commitment and done well in delivery should also be not shying to show best practices, to show it's actually doable, to lead by example. So greenwash and green gushing, both are not acceptable. We need some middle way. Do well and say well.
Any more questions from the audience? I know we have about 2-3 minutes left before the coffee is piping hot waiting outside for you and the break. So I would encourage you also, if you don't have the question now, grab the panelists on their way out before they disappear. They're full of insights, knowledge, and things to share, but they also want to hear from you. So do we have any more questions from the audience? No? Okay. Then
I think people are looking to the tea break.
Yeah, I know. At least it's not the afternoon tea break, then they would be already half dead. So, Sachin, a question. You have a consulting arm where you have to be a little bit more, let's say, polite, and you're running a purpose-driven organization that's where sometimes the job is to call a spade a spade. How do you balance that kind of thing of you can't offend your customers, but you can offend the public?
I think very easily. I think part of the when people call our consulting arm in, they already know they've done something wrong, I think, or they want to do something right, essentially. And anyway, just taking a step back, Aware does 3 things, essentially. We have services, so we have the Women's Helpline, we have a Sexual Assault Care Center. We also have a research and advocacy arm, so we put out like a gender omnibus for gender equality just before the conversations on women's development, the white paper that the government did, as a companion piece to that. And we also have the consulting arm. And the 3 kind of work together because we get our on-the-ground information and data from the women we counsel. And that forms our research, a foundation for our research. And that also goes into material for our consulting arm, where we sort of teach organizations or educate their staff on how to be more, things like sensitivity training, and how to sort of ramp up their structure, essentially. So it's all interconnected quite nicely. We're not rude to our clients. I think we are polite, but we are firm in telling them, well, this needs to change, or this person probably needs more intensive training to correct a certain perspective or a certain behavior.
Thank you. Maybe to wrap it up, I have 2 questions on my mind with short answers, ideally. One is from the whole panel. Who do you think is the global leader in ESG and why? You can't name, of course, your own company, your previous employer, or the other panelists. Who is a global leader in ESG and why?
Well, there are few names there. I think almost like a household name people know. Unilever, for instance, has been always cited as a great example. I think the reason being the commitment at the top. Their previous CEO has been championing the agenda, not just say about it, but also embedding everything in what they do, make sustainability part of the integral part of the business. So that's one. Secondly, Patagonia, an outdoor clothing company who have been making enduring stuff, but also now committed, when we talk about consumer behavior or whatever, circular economy, the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, and they put that into a business model and doing that.
Though Unilever, I think, is a little bit in a shambles because of, I think they bought Häagen-Dazs ice cream, who has a slightly different approach on what the S and G means when it comes to certain parts of the world. But no, I appreciate it. And at least they're not shying away from that conversation. Thank you, Sarah. Jason.
I'm going to take this at a different angle so that you don't tell me I'm wrong.
It's not my job to call anybody out.
My father-in-law, and I'll tell you why. He's a 78-year-old farmer, and this is a guy that takes ESG to heart because he's got an old truck. He just uses it forever. I mean, he's never going to give up his old truck because he doesn't see why he should. It still runs. It still does its job. Why should he trade it in for a new one? Everything that comes into that house gets used and reused and reused and put somewhere where they can get it again later if they need it again. It doesn't get thrown away. He's got a Quonset in the backyard, back 40, so to speak, that's full of stuff from his kids and from their kids, and it's all reusable. He doesn't throw anything away. And in my mind, I mean, they live off their garden. You know, it's just the epitome of ESG. This guy and his family, to me, is a global leader in sustainability.
Can we please get the recording for his wife? Christmas is safe.
Can I just say that was a tremendous example of storytelling? Yeah, I see. It's so effective. The room applauded, right? So there's still room for stories. I don't have a role model for ESG leader, and I think we're living in an age where there are very few role models in any field, to be honest. So I would say my role models or leader in ESG would be anybody I meet, the people all around the world who are doing their little part, or they're doing their part, big and small, to further the ESG agenda.
Can I actually add on a little bit different angle? Yes, Asian voices or Asian sort of personality in terms of storytelling needed to be improved. That's a challenge for all of us doing professional communications in Asia. Just give you one small example. I now work for the World Energy Council. We have partnership with BBC Storyworks, who is fantastic in storytelling. It is about humanizing energy, really telling energy transition stories from a human angle. So far, we have run 2 series, and I'm so disheartened to see stories from Asia are lacking, not enough. And that doesn't mean not a lot of things happen in Asia. It's just we are not coming forth to tell good story. So
that's a representation. That's a representation, DEI there.
So the call to action is the world need diversity. The world need Asian voice to be heard. The world need also to see Asian is in action for sustainability. How about that? So get on with the work to tell good stories from our part of the world.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was a wonderful closing statement. So if you want to start with yourself. A role model might be in your family. Enough is never enough. And like Mr. Tommy Coe said earlier on, we are all doing it for what's tomorrow, our children and our children's children. What we're doing next is just for you. It's giving you a break. But before that, please put your hands together for that fantastic panel. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Lars. That was a really good summation. That's saving me the need for having to do that. Thank you, Xiaowei, Jason, and Sojin. And yes, we are moving into a networking break. There's coffee, tea, some light bites out in the foyer. Please take time to grab our panelists if you had questions that weren't answered, and come back when you hear the bell. Thank you.